everyone, I hope you're doing great. So we're in the kitchen and I'm going to be making some ballistic gelatine. Now, you might have seen these blocks in a previous video. They're not wide enough to really take the energy of high velocity bullets. So when I shot these with a 7mm Rem mag, I kind of split them and blew lumps off them. They worked well, they made the bullets expand and break apart like I'd hoped for in the test, but I could have done with bigger blocks. So I'm going to use a larger mould, but I'm going to show you the process of how to make this ballistic gelatine so that you can do it at home if you want to. Now, to make ballistic gelatine, you're going to have to get yourself some real gelatin powder, okay? Now, gelatin powder is not all the same. You need to get a high bloom gelatin, something like this, a Pork Gelatine in 240 bloom. And you might be thinking, well, what's bloom? Now, the bloom of the gelatin is kind of like the strength of it. Now, the blooming process is where you add water to the gelatin powder and it starts to absorb that water a little bit and it starts to puff up and it turns itself into sort of a thick sauce. But if you start with a low bloom gelatin, like about 120 bloom, it's only good for making kids jelly. It's no use for making ballistic gelatine. You've got to get at least a 240 bloom to a 300 bloom gelatin. So let's show you the process in step by step so you can do it at home, no problem. Yeah, God! Yeah, Daddy! Okay, so the gelatin I'm using, it's by Ingredients. Get it off eBay, it's about 20 quid a kilo. It's 240 bloom pig gelatin, pretty good stuff to use. So the first thing we've got to do is to bloom the gelatin. Add water to it so that it starts to absorb that water nice and relaxed, no pressure, no fast heating, and we're just going to put warm water in. Now, a good recipe for decently strong gelatin is about 5 litres to 6 litres of water to 1 kilo of gel. It's a very fine powder, so just pop it in. You don't need to be too subtle. And then start adding your water. Now, on most of your kettles, you're going to have an indication of how much water is in there. So I'm going to add about, I think 4.5 litres to this one. So give or take sort of 3 kettles worth. So nice warm water, not hot, just warm. And then we're going to put it into the fridge just after. So once we've added the water, give it a good stir. Use a sort of stirring tool that you're not bothered about chucking in the bin afterwards, because it's going to be covered in gelatin and gelatin does smell and it's not the best stuff. So for 1 kilo of gelatin, about 4.5 litres is pretty good. So I'll add that water now and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so we've got the water added and you'll notice straight away there's lots of these bubbles get on top of it. Now, getting sort of surface scum in the gelatin, that's pretty common, but you need to give your gelatin a good stir, because what will happen very quickly is it'll try to sort of turn into a chunk of gel. But a nice little stir, it'll break it up and the powder will get a good chance to relax in the water and start absorbing the water low rate, but without too much lumpiness. If it does get lumpy, don't worry about it. When you warm the gelatin up later, all those lumps will start to break down anyways. But a nice little stir, it'll turn into a sort of sauce mix. Don't worry too much about any lumps, like I say, they will break down if there's heat on it later. But after we've given this a good 5-minute stir, we're going to pop it into the fridge. And from the fridge, we're going to leave it there for a good 6 hours or even overnight for a 12 hours or longer. And that'll let the gel swell into the pot, and you'll notice that it's a much thicker sauce looking mix. And even right now you can see that it's starting to thicken up, but it's going to take a little bit longer than just 5 minutes before we should heat it and start melting that gelatin down properly. So a nice little stir. It will get tough and that's what you want, but just a good little stir. Don't be too lazy about it. Okay, so with only 4.5 litres of water, you'll notice the gel gets really thick, so the mix is quite stodgy, almost like mashed potato. And that tells you do need a bit more water to the mix. So like I said, 5 to 6 litres total is a really good mix, but to get started, 4.5 litres odd, even only 3 litres just to get the mix started is really good. So add that extra water in as you need it, and then you'll have your volume. So once that water's in, give it a little mix round, it will quickly mix in, but it's going to be tough stuff by now. But like I say, 5 to 6 litres of water is ideal, but if you went up to even 7 or 8 litres, that wouldn't be a problem. Just your gel block wouldn't be as tough as if you only had the likes of 5 to 6. So give it a mix, but don't be afraid to experiment. I've heard of mixes up to 10 litres of water for 1 kilo of gelatine, but I wouldn't recommend that as a first block. It might just fall apart. But once that's mixed in, stick it in, leave it to relax, and then it can get popped in the fridge and we can leave it for the next step. Okay folks, do remember, put your gel in the fridge after you've done the mix. Give it a few hours just to let it bloom and settle, but once that's done you can then heat the gel up later. But try and pop it in your man fridge. If you've got shared fridges, it's important not to just chuck it in their fridge because they will go nuts.
3 hours later.
Okay, so a few hours later, the gel's nice and firm. I've given it a little stir, but it's nice and tough. So this stuff needs heated up. You certainly couldn't shoot it, but it's quite firm to the touch. So let's go get it heated up. Now nothing fancy, we're actually going to use a wood stove to do it. Okay, so it's just about time to heat up this gel and melt it down. Now I'm going to do it on the top of the stove. I'm just going to get a little fire going, get the stove top nice and hot. Not so hot it's like an iron where if you do a spit test on it, it just, sizzles away. But nice and hot, so hot to the touch, you could certainly touch it. But if you're going to be doing it on the likes of an electric cooker, if you've got it on the lowest setting, that would be fine. But if you're going to be doing, on a gas hob, that's just a little bit hot for the bottom of the pan. But what you can do is use the likes of a baking tray that's got water in it, then put the pan on top so it's not got direct heat to the bottom of the pan. If you do it that way, you'll melt your gel just fine. You're not trying to boil the gel, you only want it to get to about 50-60 degrees where it melts down, and once it's melted and it's nice and smooth, you can see through it. You can add some hydrogen peroxide to the mix, but we'll do that soon. We've certainly got to melt this mix down and see what we get on with. But let's get the pan on, it's almost ready to go. Okay, so we've had the mix on the heat for a little while. It's starting to soften up. You can see it's starting to turn into sort of applesauce again. It's nice and soft, but it'll take a while for this to heat up and go clear. Probably about half an hour. The actual top of the stove, it's kind of really hot to touch. It's not sizzle hot, but it's certainly quite hot to the touch. And that's all we want. We just want to get this gel up to about sort of 50-60 degrees, just so it's nice and soft and melted away. And then it'll start to go clear, almost amber in colour. So you can see here, we're starting to melt down. That's exactly what we want. But start to the bottom, make sure you don't get any hot spots where it can burn it. Okay folks, so here's an interesting bit. You're going to get this kind of foam that forms on top of the gelatin as you heat it up. That's not a problem, most of it melts away. But easiest way to get rid of it, there's not much, is just to work the sort of spoon or ladle, whatever you've got, and you just move the foam into a corner and then pick it up and then just get rid of it. And very quickly you'll lift the foam off. There's not a lot of it, it's not a big deal. When you pour your gel into molds, you can lift it off then as well because the gel stays warm for quite a while. This gel is not really hot. So you can get up to sort of 50-60 degrees, that's not a problem, even a little bit hotter. But just to give you a sort of sense of how hot this pan is, I could put my hands on the side of it. It's not roasting hot. I can certainly touch the pan near the bottom. Again, it's not going to burn me. It's hot to the touch, but the gel's only about sort of 50-60 degrees. So don't overcook it, don't boil it, because you'll start to break the gel down. But this gel's just about ready for the next step. But I'll clear a little bit more of that foam off, and then we'll add some hydrogen peroxide. So the gel's not looking too bad. There's still a little bit of foam on top, but I'm not worried. Now, here's the important bit. If you want your gel nice and sort of clear, a lot clearer certainly than the sort of amber colour it is, hydrogen peroxide works really well at making it clearer. Now, you want to really add about half a bottle per kilogram. So this is 6% hydrogen peroxide. So just a little bit less than half a bottle into a kilo like we've got in here. That should be about perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Not going to do anything fancy, just pour in about half a bottle. That'll be about enough, just less than half a bottle. And then just give it a little stir and let it settle. Now I'm not going to add any more heat now. I'm just going to let it settle down. And you might find there's a little bit of foam rises to the surface, not a big deal. give that a little stir just to make sure the hydrogen peroxide is right the way through it, and then leave it for just a little bit. So I'm going to let the fire go out. There's still plenty of heat in the stove, and then that's not looking too bad. Now, at this stage, if you've only got, say, 6 sort of litres worth of material and you wanted 8 or 9 litres, you can certainly add a bit more water in, that's not a problem. But you could also add in used gel blocks. So you can reuse your gel blocks once they've been shot, just melt them back into the mix. This would be a perfect time to do that. And what I might do is get a couple of bits of previous gel blocks and just make up the volume while the mix is still hot. So here you go, here's some old gel block bits. Just break them up, they're quite tough, but into little bits, and they'll quickly melt down. So here we go, it's a full pot of gel. Now this might not be enough for the big mould I've got, but we'll pour it and we'll see how it gets on. Hopefully it's going to hit the maximum level on the container, but fingers crossed. Let's pour it. Now there's a really good chance I'm going to spill all of this and my wife's going to kill me. But let's just have a pour and see what happens. Oh, that's not terrible. Now you can see all those surface bubbles. Not too worried about them, because just like before, you just fish them off the surface and get rid of them. But that poured okay. So that's going to need to cool for at least, a day or so, because it's quite a big pour. But once that's cooled down and it starts to firm up, as long as you keep them cool, they're nice and tough, it'll be ideal. It'll be very interesting to see how clear that comes out. It should be okay, but because of mixed gel blocks, it's a fresh pour with a mixture of new gelatine and old used stuff. It'll be interesting to see how that changes the look of it. But, little reward. Woo! Right, so your gel's set in the mould. What you need to do is get it out of the mould. Now, if it's a metal mould like this, they get stuck in quite tough. So you really need to press down on all the edges and pull it away from the metal as best you can. Don't be too rough at the sort of fine edges, because you will start to split it. But if you've got kids' rulers, when you pull it away from the edges, so you can slide a ruler down the back. Now get your ruler wet. Wet's good, it slides down through the gel. And once it's at the bottom, you create a big air gap. So the gel's going to pull away from the metal, no problem. And then it's just a case of turning the mould upside down and letting gravity just let the block drop out. Air will go in behind the mould and the weight will just let it drop. Quite easy to do. Oh, there we go. Right, here's a big gel block with a few bits on it. Let's have a look. And it's pretty heavy stuff. It's not too bad. I should have cleaned the mould out much better. There's a lot of little bits that must have been on the bottom. But we've got our big gel block. I think it's probably about, I would say 5.5 inches deep. Certainly a lot wider. And about, I would think 11 inches long. Now certainly, because of the size of this block, we could split it into 2. There'd be no problem doing that. And that'd give us 2 good sized gel blocks to go and shoot. But I might go shoot this block as it is with a 7mm Rem mag, and then we'll get a really good idea as the bullet goes through what kind of damage is going to be done to the block, but also how the bullet performs. So we'll get a much bigger wound track cut through. The gel block won't come apart. It'll be good fun, certainly. Okay folks, so making gel blocks, it's not so bad. Now this is just a little one, so I'm going to shoot it, I might as well, but I think I'll shoot it with a 223, maybe the 7mm Rem mag, and why not, just for a bit of fun, get out a 50 caliber BMG and see if we can blow it to absolutely little bits. Now the big block, it'll be really interesting to see if it can hold up against a 50 cal BMG. So if you want to see that, like, share and subscribe folks. But thanks a lot for joining me, and I hope you have fun with gel. Cheers all.